Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. I am here in a slightly different location with a slightly different level of makeup on my face because I am planning on doing my first reading vlog. We'll see how it all goes. But today is the 19th of May and yesterday I went to the supermarket and was just wandering around the book aisles, as I do, and I found that this was here a day before publication, and so I had to snatch it. This is, of course, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the prequel to the original Hunger Games series, and I know a lot of people are really excited, a little bit skeptical about this one, and I've already had a couple of friends ask me what I think of it, so I thought I might vlog my experience of reading this. I am currently 80 pages in at the moment, and it's a really interesting one. It's a bit bizarre looking at this world from a completely different perspective. This is told from the perspective of Coriolanus Snow, who was the villain in the original series, but it takes place about 64 64 years ago during the 10th annual Hunger Games, where he is 18 years old and he is the mentor to the District 12 tribute. It's an interesting one, and hopefully I will like it. I know a lot of people have been quite burned by follow-ups to different series over the last few years, so fingers crossed, this will be good. A few things that I have noticed so far whilst reading this is that, as I say, the perspective is completely different. We are looking at what was the villain in the original series, so that already shakes up the perspective a little bit. I'm finding the perspective of Snow to be a little bit detached, which is interesting because Katniss was already quite a detached, unemotional narrator, but it seems to be, the writing style seems to be fairly telling rather than showing, the classic show don't tell, and I'm trying to work out if that is just Suzanne Collins's writing style or if it is just the character and his personality, because obviously he is a very politically minded person already, so it's always in his best interest to tell things as being better than they actually are. I didn't reread the original series prior to reading this, and I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I already have like very fond memories of the Hunger Games, so I didn't feel like I needed to go back just to refresh my mind. The other thing of note is that Suzanne Collins's love of using ancient Roman names for all of her characters is definitely there. We've had a whole long list of capital mentors who have been mentioned, and they've all got Roman names, and it's quite funny. It's also interesting at this point to see the different seeds that Suzanne Collins is trying to plant in these early chapters, because we are coming at this world of Panem at a point where the Hunger Games themselves are not actually as popular as we know that they grow to be by the time we get to the first Hunger Games book. They're actually fairly unpopular. There's been 10 years of these games and the capital usually don't want to know. So it's interesting to kind of think, is Snow going to be the one to come in and make everything, you know, the big grand spectacle that everybody grows to love? Snow himself at this point is a really interesting character to spend time with because he lives in the capital. He's from a once prominent family, but at the moment they have fallen on hard times. I feel like Suzanne Collins is trying to add a little bit of sympathy for him and a bit of commentary on the different levels of privilege, because obviously he lives in the capital. We know that he already lives a much better life than the people who are in the districts, but he is at the bottom and his grip on capital life is so tenuous. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how she develops that over the course of the book. back in a little bit later because this book is sending my brain down so many rabbit holes. So I know that when this book was originally announced, there was quite a lot of controversy surrounding it, mainly due to the fact that this was going to be focusing on the villain of the original story. And I can kind of understand that. People can be quite uncomfortable with this idea of trying to give a redeemable backstory to a character who we know as being so villainous and who has done despicable things in the past. They don't want to have this redemption arc because they did things that were completely irredeemable. They don't want to see the author somehow try and justify this bad behaviour. And whilst I've been reading this book, I've been noticing lots of moments where Snow does show little moments of showing care and concern for the characters and for the tributes. And I've noticed that I've been finding it really hard to trust him as a narrator, knowing where he ends up. And I'm also finding a lot of moments where Snow's darkness kind of seeps through. You can see already that he is showing these signs of being a little bit manipulative and ruthless and cynical, which we see built upon in the Hunger Games series. So far, I don't think that Suzanne Collins is trying to present Snow as being a redeemable figure. The other thing with me that is coming up again and again, popping up in my brain, is how the original games is so strikingly different to the games that we later see. The thoughts that are popping up for me a lot are this idea of there being a sliding scale of morality, different levels of good and bad. In this earlier Hunger Games, the tributes are treated as complete non-entities. They are treated like the lowest of the low as prisoners. They're shoved into cages for residents of the capital just to gawk at. They aren't being fed. So by the time they are getting to the games, they're already in a severely weakened state. There's so little concern for their safety. And this is something that we see Snow notices and he shows quite a bit of distaste with. Whereas in the original series, during the week that the tributes spend in the capital, they are treated lavishly. They are fed, they are dressed, they are trained, they are protected by peacekeepers. But the flip side to this is that as a result, the residents of the capital have complete cognitive dissonance from the spectre and the glamour that they are seeing with how the Hunger Games is presented to what is actually happening in the arena, the sheer brutality. In this book, the capital residents know what they are seeing is brutal. They know that it's despicable. There is dislike of the games and there is talk about the games not carrying on. In the original series, the capital members have become so desensitized to it and they treat it like it's entertainment. It's only in the districts that they really understand how brutal and disgusting it has become. So it's really driving home this question of what's worse? If the games had been kept in their original brutal state, then you'd think that eventually the capital residents wouldn't have put up with it and would have overthrown the system years earlier than we see they do in the original series. And it's a theme that the Hunger Games has dealt with before. You know, we see President Snow doing all of these terrible, terrible things, but President Coyne isn't much better. She also deals with brutality to get her ends, but to serve a different agenda. So yes, that is the rabbit hole that this has brought me down. I am currently 186 pages through. I'm sure my brain's going to go through many more before long. Okay, so we are coming up to the end of the night now. I'm on page 339 and really quite enjoying it so far. I think something I knew from the original series is that Suzanne Collins really knows how to build tension and you just leaving you feeling like, oh my god, how are they going to get out of this? Even if you already know like who's alive at the end, just that suspense that she built up, I'm just really enjoying so far. But yeah, we'll see how we get on tomorrow. Hopefully I can get it done. So see you tomorrow. Good morning, everybody. So another day, gonna start back onto this. As I said yesterday, I'm about 330 something pages in, and I've just gotten up to part 3, and I think things are about to really ramp up. It's been really interesting seeing the Hunger Games from the perspective of the mentors, as opposed to being in the arena as a tribute. It kind of reminds me of when I was younger and I read some Annie and Finnick fan fiction, and you got to see things from Finnick's point of view as a mentor. As I said yesterday, one of the main things that struck me out is how tense Suzanne Collins is making this, which, considering that I know that President Snow, well, that he will become President Snow, I know that he survives this and, you know, ends up on top up until the beginning of the original series. It's amazing how much I'm just thinking, how's he going to get there? Like, right now, I don't see how he can do it. One of the main criticisms I think I would have of this so far, though, is that I'm not feeling a particular pull to any of the characters. I don't think they are quite as well defined as the original series. I think there's a handful, like, 4 or 5 characters who I think have personalities in their own right, and then everybody else just seems to be lumped into capital person or tribute. So I'm hoping that will start to improve, start to pick up, because there's just a few people that have any sort of distinct personalities of their own. But we will carry on. I think I should be able to get through this today, hopefully, so I will check in later. So I was talking a little bit yesterday about how the games in this prequel series are a little bit different, a bit more brutal, and how the later games in the original series are both gamified and made a little bit more glamorous, and whether or not that is a good thing, whether or not giving that little bit of kindness is actually a kindness, or if this little bit of kindness that is shown by the Capitol during the Hunger Games is just another tool used by Panem, by the Capitol, to prop up the government and keep it ongoing because nobody is going to complain. There's a really great scene in the first Hunger Games movie, which I don't think is actually in the original book series. I can't remember if there is a counterpart chapter. It's a scene that doesn't include Katniss, and the original series is entirely from Katniss's perspective, and it is between President Snow and Seneca Crane, who is one of the game makers, where he talks about the fact that the reason that there has to be a victor in the Hunger Games is because it gives the districts that little tiny piece of hope. And as long as there is that tiny little bit of hope, the districts will not try to rise up because there is that chance that is being offered that things might improve for them. And I think that message that was in the original Hunger Games series really sharply returns in this book, where you see that more brutal side of the games, where all of these aspects of hope, the districts getting extra food if they have a winner, the victor village, where all of the victors go to live after the Hunger Games, that isn't present in this book, but serves as a really useful tool later down the line for the Capitol to maintain some sort of control. And it really made me think about things that we kind of accept because of gamification and because of glamorization. You know, it's absolutely mad to me thinking about it. You know, we watch so many TV shows where people are just shoved into extraordinary circumstances, for example, thrown into a house, thrown into a jungle, thrown into an island, and we stick cameras around on them and we basically monitor their behaviour 24/7. And because we've gamified it and made it more glamorous, we completely accept this invasion of privacy and we find it fun. And I'm not completely immune to that because I do watch I'm a Celebrity every year. I enjoy it, but it's so weird that we turn our brains off because there is that little bit of glamour to it and we have gamified it, what do we just accept? So yeah, that was a major theme with this book. It also talks a great deal about the nature of good and evil, whether or not we are born inherently good and then the world that we are surrounded with corrupts us, or if it is the other way around, that humans are inherently violent and therefore we need a society that strictly controls us. It's nothing that is new to this book, but I think it does explore it in an interesting way. So overall, just for any of my friends who were wondering whether or not this book is worth picking up, I did overall enjoy the experience of reading this. I liked how much it gave me to think about. Do I think that this book was entirely necessary? Do I think that you have to read this as a Hunger Games fan? Not necessarily. I don't think there's anything too groundbreaking and mind-blowing that you need to read. I think if you're a completionist or if you're a massive fan of the series, if you like that extra bit of world building, and especially if you like getting villain backstory and villain psychology, this will be a fun read for you. I personally really enjoy that, so I'm glad I've read it. I'm trying to refrain as much as possible from giving a spoiler, but I think it will kind of come across. There are two major relationships in this book that kind of guide Snow's journey through it. One of them is a platonic friendship and one of them is romantic. And personally, I found the platonic friendship to be much more compelling than the romantic one, and I think that was probably because the friend was just much more compelling and dynamic as a character than the romantic love interest. And I don't necessarily think that that is a flaw just of this book. I think generally Suzanne Collins' ability to write romantic love plots is a little bit weak. I think that's probably the reason why the Gale versus Peter debate is still ongoing. I don't think romance is her strong point. I also think there are definitely moments where the pacing of this did drag a little bit. I think, you know, it's a 500-page book. There are definitely some areas that could have been skipped or could be cut. I think if you're somebody who really relishes beautiful language, this is not going to be the book for you, but I don't think you'd have enjoyed the original Hunger Games series anyway if you wanted very beautiful lyrical writing. It is clinical and to the point because that's kind of the world that we're dealing with. People can't afford to be super romantic. But yeah, just to reiterate, I did really enjoy reading this, and I actually quite enjoyed vlogging the experience of reading this. I think it's kind of nice to be able to sit back and read a little bit and then talk about it rather than having to worry about having fully formed thoughts during a wrap up. So maybe I might incorporate something like this into any future reviews that I do. We'll see how we go. But yeah, thanks so much for watching this and I hope you're having a great day. Thanks.